would like this young lady this is her first job, I would like her to do a little homework.
Karoline Leavitt. The left pretends to be a champion of women until they find one who is a conservative.
Because she said something yesterday that really pissed me off. And that was, she said there will be no wokeness here.
Oh, yeah.
Once that happens, they love nothing more than tearing down women with the most petty and vacuous of insults.
Let me explain something to you, because without that wokeness, you might not have that job.
Yeah.
I would just say a strong message who are out there pretending to be outraged about the long list of crap that this...
Women were not invited to that table. Women were not invited to many tables in this nation.
Is wokeness really about inclusive progress? Or does it silence certain voices? In a fiery clash on national television, rising conservative star Karoline Leavitt took Whoopi Goldberg head-on, exposing deep divisions on The View. Get ready to see how this explosive confrontation revealed uncomfortable truths about media bias and the true meaning of diversity. Before Karoline took on The View, her name was already resonating in conservative circles. She's known for her vocal stances on free speech, media biases, and the so-called hypocrisy she sees in progressive spaces. In interviews and political forums, she's portrayed wokeness as a trendy label that often runs counter to the values of genuine diversity and open debate. To some, Karoline is a fearless crusader, calling out inconsistencies that more established politicians seem to tiptoe around. To others, she's a provocateur who exploits cultural divides for attention. Yet, what's undeniable is her swift ascent. She's not a seasoned politician with decades of experience. Instead, she's emblematic of a new generation that refuses to stay quiet. Where older conservatives might tread carefully, Karoline doubles down. She's made it her mission to challenge what she sees as an elitist narrative, that to be inclusive, you must stifle dissenting opinions. Her growing popularity online caught the eye of talk shows looking for fresh faces, something The View has historically done to stir debate or to highlight those outside the mainstream. Little did they know how heated this particular invitation would become. On The View, Whoopi Goldberg usually takes the lead when it comes to addressing hot-button issues. She's outspoken, unapologetically liberal, and deeply committed to the idea that wokeness is fundamentally about justice. From her perspective, wokeness has propelled social movements that broaden the table for women, people of color, and marginalized communities. She views it as a call to rectify historical wrongs. By championing progressive changes, Goldberg believes she's defending the rights and freedoms that many Americans fought hard to secure. This viewpoint resonates with legions of fans, who see The View as a platform where major social issues are tackled head-on. They cheer when Whoopi defends the necessity of being awake to inequality. However, critics argue that The View rarely offers meaningful space for those who question the boundaries of wokeness. Time and again, conservative guests have felt sidelined or attacked. In this environment, Karoline Leavitt arrived prepared, poised to demonstrate that the show's portrayal of wokeness isn't always about genuine inclusion. When Karoline joined Whoopi and the other co-hosts that day, there was a noticeable edge from the start. The conversation was supposed to be about broader cultural topics, the usual fare of social debates and political disagreements. But soon, the tension thickened. Whoopi pointedly suggested that Karoline owed her seat at the table to wokeness, implying that progressive movements had paved the way for young conservative women to have a voice in the first place. That was all Karoline needed. Without missing a beat, she countered that her presence was due to her own hard work and the popularity of her ideas, not just the grace of a social movement she believes has turned rigid and dogmatic. She challenged Whoopi's assumption, questioning how truly inclusive wokeness can be if it only tolerates one type of political ideology. In seconds, the energy shifted from a civilized chat to a heated standoff. The studio grew quiet as Karoline accused the hosts of pushing out conservative viewpoints whenever they didn't align with the show's favored narrative. But that wasn't the whole story. The real spark came when Whoopi doubled down and insisted that wokeness was the reason Karoline, as a woman, had opportunities. This blunt statement underscored an often-heard claim that if you're part of a historically marginalized group, you should be grateful to progressive movements. Karoline's rebuttal was equally blunt. She argued that wokeness has escalated from a campaign for fairness into something that polices speech and punishes anyone who deviates from its evolving rules. The mood in the studio became electric. Co-hosts tried to cut in, but Karoline refused to soften her stance. Karoline soon pointed out that The View and other mainstream platforms have a habit of championing women, until those women happen to be conservative. At that point, she argued, progressivism often resorts to personal attacks and dismissive behavior. There's no question that The View has a track record of clashing with right-leaning guests, but Karoline took it a step further, asserting that wokeness itself has morphed into a tool for censorship. Rather than bringing people together, she said, it draws a hard line. Either you support its evolving demands, or you risk being ostracized. Using examples from across media and academia, Karoline illustrated how quickly conservative women are labeled as internalized misogynists or worse. She pointed to prominent female commentators who have been derided, mocked, or simply not invited back for voicing unpopular opinions. According to her, that's the side of wokeness The View avoids discussing. It's not about remedying historical inequities anymore, but rather about using moral righteousness to stifle alternative viewpoints. As Karoline spoke, many in the audience seemed taken aback. Whoopi, visibly frustrated, attempted to respond that attacking wokeness means attacking the progress that allowed more women and minorities to have a platform at all. But for Karoline, that argument felt like a smokescreen, one that ignores how quickly that same progress can be weaponized against people who don't follow the party line. The segment cut to a commercial, leaving viewers in a swirl of controversy, and social media users wasted no time posting clips that went viral. When the show ended, the debate didn't. Critics on both sides saw the confrontation as a microcosm of the current culture war. One camp contended that if Karoline truly valued free speech, she wouldn't dismiss the tangible gains of wokeness so easily. To them, wokeness has helped open doors for women in politics, media, and business. It's a movement built on fighting discrimination and holding people accountable for harmful rhetoric. Yet Karoline's supporters insisted that she wasn't dismissing equality at all. Rather, she was calling out a new brand of dogma that they feel has overshadowed the original aims of social justice movements. In their view, wokeness now polices thought as much as it promotes equity. Moderates were caught in the middle, wondering if there could be a balanced approach, champion real inclusivity while still allowing space for conservative critiques. This isn't just a question for daytime television. It mirrors splits in workplaces, classrooms, and social media feeds across the nation. Terms like woke once signified a praiseworthy awareness of societal injustices. Today, some see them as rigid ideological markers that can fracture communities instead of uniting them. The cultural divide grows even more pronounced with each public clash, whether it's on a talk show, a college campus, or a corporate board meeting. People of all backgrounds are increasingly forced to pick a side. It didn't take long for the internet to light up with opinions on the clash between Whoopi Goldberg and Karoline Leavitt. Clips circulated on Twitter and Instagram Reels, with hashtags trending within hours. Some labeled Karoline a firebrand, praising her for standing firm. Others called her disrespectful, claiming she was deliberately provoking Whoopi for viral fame. Supporters of Whoopi argued that her passion for wokeness reflects a commitment to historically marginalized communities. They said Karoline's critique played into a larger attempt to discredit social justice movements. On the flip side, Karoline's allies claimed this was exactly what she was talking about, an immediate rush to label dissenters as ignorant or insensitive, rather than grappling with the substance of their arguments. Amid the swirl of debates, certain moments stood out. Whoopi's insistence that wokeness directly enabled Karoline's success, Karoline's scathing retort that wokeness silences conservative women, the co-hosts' attempts to intervene in a discussion spiraling out of their control. In each heated exchange, viewers on social media found plenty of fodder for their own commentary. Some even expressed sympathy for The View's producers, who once again found themselves at the center of a national controversy, trying to manage a segment that clearly spun into uncharted territory. But the debate wasn't just about who won. Many recognized deeper questions about whether the media environment fosters open discourse or punishes it. Talk shows have historically thrived on conflict. Conflict drives ratings. Yet when the dust settles, does a tense exchange like this help us understand each other better, or does it just create more noise? The answers varied, but no one could deny that the conversation forced people to confront the complexities behind the label woke. Though not part of the official broadcast, rumors and reports began circulating that behind-the-scenes tensions were high even before the cameras rolled. Some insiders suggested that producers were prepared for a spirited exchange, but didn't anticipate this level of friction. The View, after all, has consistently positioned itself as a space where women from different backgrounds come together to discuss hot topics. Critics argue, however, that the lineup hasn't truly mirrored America's ideological diversity in years. Karoline Leavitt's experience might echo that of other conservative women who have come through those doors. Certain commentators have recounted feeling overtalked, patronized, or subjected to simplistic stereotypes. They accuse the show of paying lip service to inclusivity, only to shut down contrarian perspectives in a live segment. To them, The View symbolizes the progressive mainstream's reluctance to grapple honestly with conservative ideas, especially when those ideas come from women who refuse to toe a particular line. Nevertheless, fans of The View see such accusations as unfair. They point to episodes where conservative viewpoints were aired and even embraced by some co-hosts. They argue that sharp disagreements are inevitable when the subject matter is polarizing. As for The View's producers, they generally maintain that the show's purpose is to reflect the broad range of female experiences and voices. What remains an open question is whether that range genuinely includes conservative perspectives or merely features them as a foil for liberal arguments. In the following days, Karoline went on other media outlets to reiterate her stance. She clarified she wasn't claiming wokeness had never done any good. Her larger point was that wokeness has grown more about ideological policing than genuine inclusion. She described a scenario where people are afraid to voice nuanced opinions, lest they be labeled intolerant, phobic, or simply out of touch. One of her major contentions is that woke narratives often overshadow real policy debates. She pointed to controversies like government spending on questionable programs, the crackdown on alternative viewpoints in academia, and the mainstream media's occasional reluctance to cover stories that might contradict a progressive agenda. She argued that genuine progress occurs when a variety of perspectives are allowed to compete on equal footing without immediate condemnation or name-calling. Her supporters see her commentary as part of a broader fight for free speech and intellectual diversity. They credit her for exposing the narrow boundaries of debate in certain media spaces. Yet her detractors believe she weaponizes the term wokeness to deride initiatives designed to improve representation and equality. They see her approach as disingenuous, co-opting the language of inclusion to criticize a movement that strives to rectify long-standing power imbalances. Meanwhile, Whoopi Goldberg briefly addressed the controversy on a later episode. Though not dedicating an entire segment to it, she reiterated that wokeness isn't about silencing anyone, it's about lifting up people who historically had no voice. She said critics twist wokeness to suit a narrative that portrays progressive ideals as oppressive. From Whoopi's vantage point, the push for political correctness and greater social awareness is always framed negatively by those who resist change. Some viewers praised her for sticking to her principles. They argued that the backlash against wokeness stems from discomfort with a society that actively reconsiders old power dynamics. Others, however, thought her remarks sidestepped Karoline's core criticisms, namely, that wokeness often excludes or ridicules conservatives, especially if they're women who challenge the narrative that only progressives fight for women's rights. This lingering debate reveals an important reality of modern discourse. Everyone wants to claim the moral high ground. Both Whoopi and Karoline believe they are standing up for authenticity, freedom, and fairness. Yet their definitions of these values differ dramatically, and that gap can feel impossible to bridge. That's why episodes like this continue to capture public attention, drawing millions of online comments from people who see bits of themselves reflected in each side. The tension between Karoline and Whoopi underscores just how fraught the national conversation has become. Both individuals genuinely believe they have the moral imperative to speak out. Karoline frames her mission as defending free speech against a rising tide of groupthink. Whoopi sees herself as a guardian of social justice, fighting to preserve and expand the gains made by marginalized communities. But how does a society unify these perspectives, or at least allow them to coexist? When wokeness first gained traction, many saw it as a beneficial awakening to injustices that had long been overlooked. Over time, critics began to argue that it had devolved into a culture of cancellation and speech codes. Supporters countered that these so-called speech codes were simply the accountability that powerful voices had evaded for centuries. Whichever side you lean toward, it's impossible to ignore the friction at places like The View. The debate about whether wokeness has gone too far or not far enough echoes in political campaigns, Twitter feeds, and living rooms. People worry that if they say the wrong thing, they'll face social or professional repercussions. Others insist this fear is overblown and that the real issue is the persistent bigotry and discrimination people face. In a climate this charged, even a single talk show segment can become a flashpoint for widespread conversation.